When all supplementary questions have been answered by the President, we will proceed to the next question on the question paper. As I hand over to the Speaker, I wish to welcome the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the Republic of South Africa, who is in the chamber today. We welcome you, Honorable
Chairperson.
Honorable Mkhali PS.
Chairperson, the President of EFF and the Deputy President of EFF are not in the House. Can you tell the IT to also allow them in the House, please, Chair?
Thank you very much. Our NA Secretary is aware and they are working on it. The Honorable, the Speaker of the National Assembly.
Thank you, Member Roto, House Chairperson. Honorable members, I welcome you all and proceed quickly to the first question, which was put to the President by the Honorable J.M. Mufokeng. The Honorable, the President.
Mr.
President.
Madam Speaker, thank you. House Chair, honorable members, both present in the House, as I am, and those who are in attendance virtually. Before I begin, I'd like to use this opportunity to pay my humble respects and those of the National Executive of our country, to those members of Parliament, our colleagues, our compatriots who have passed away in the last few weeks and months. This is a particularly difficult time for our nation as families lose loved ones to COVID-19 and other causes. And because of the ongoing pandemic, they are often unable to mourn and to honor their loved ones in a manner that we are all accustomed to and a manner that they would have wanted. We offer their families, their friends and colleagues in this House our condolences and sympathies. But we also do the same to the thousands of our compatriots who have passed away from COVID-19 as well as other related causes. Honorable members, the struggle to end gender-based violence and femicide.
Speaker, on a point of order.
Honorable President, please take your seat. What is your point of order, ma'am?
Speaker, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Speaker, there are members of EFF who are not allowed in the meeting, Speaker, and they want to listen to the President as well. So I raised a point of order before the President spoke, but the matter is not attended to. Can the members of the EFF, including the President of EFF and the Deputy President of EFF, can be allowed to speak? They want to participate as members. Thank you, Speaker.
Honorable Mkhali, you did make your point earlier on.
You are not muted, Speaker.
We can hear you.
Speaker, there is a point of order from the House. Honorable Speaker, is she muted? Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker,
Honorable House Chair, can you hear me now?
yes, we can hear you, and there is a point of order from the House, if you may take.
There was a first point of order from the House from Honorable Mkalipe, which we must attend to before we take another point of order.
Okay.
Honorable Mkalipe raised the issue that EFF members, including the president of the EFF, must be allowed in. We have undertaken to make sure that all the members are allowed onto the platform so that they can participate. That matter is being attended to. I will then take the second point of order. I saw the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Bank. The Honorable the Chief Whip.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, our own members as well, they go through waiting rooms, and we cannot let this House wait and not proceed because the time is already after 2 o'clock. Members are always urged to log in earlier than 2 o'clock. I suggest that whilst they are being let in, let's continue with the business of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are proceeding with the business of the day because the members are being let in. When
Point of order, Speaker.
No, I am still addressing the House. Can you take your seat, whoever you are? I am addressing the House. I have ruled that all the members of the National Assembly will be allowed in. When the Honorable Mkalipe started with the point of order, we were less than 199. We are standing now at 305, which means members continue to get into the platform and into the House. Can we proceed, please?
Speaker.
Honorable Mkalipe, this will
I
be your
think-
last chance on this matter.
Speaker, I think it is unfair
It
to
is
say
not
that.
unfair. All members have been
Can I
heard.
speak?
No,
Can I-
Honorable Mkalipe, no. Honorable
Speak.
Mkalipe,
You have not even
Honorable
heard.
Mkalipe,
Speaker.
every sitting we go through this. Members are urged to start as early as 30 minutes before we start, to start getting onto the platform. Members will continue being loaded into the platform. There is nothing that we are voting about in this. And members must all be allowed to come in, those who want to come in. And that is all we are saying. We are saying we cannot delay the business of the day because members are still being loaded. If we agree on that one, can we proceed?
Speaker, I don't know why are you stopping me before you even heard what I'm going to say. I'm saying it's unfair to conclude that the president of EFF and the deputy president of EFF just log in now. They have tried to come in as early as 1:15. So it's the system that is failing us, Speaker. So it's unfair for us just to continue with the business of the day while other members are locked out by the system. So we are saying to you,
On a point of order, on a point of
Honorable
order,
Mkalipe, I have given my word that all the members must be brought into.
on a point of order, Madam Speaker.
And therefore, you are on a point of order, madam. Please proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's Honourable Mazzoni. Honourable Speaker, the Leader of the official opposition managed to get to Parliament in time, as did many of the other members. It is now unfair that we are being kept waiting because of these superfluous points of order, and I would ask that you rule that the President is allowed to continue so that the time is not wasted and we can hold our President to account. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
but Speaker here,
I
we are
want to, no, Honorable Mkalipe, you will not do this.
but our members, Speaker, we are not.
Speaker.
Honorable Mkalipe, you are not going to do this. You are not.
Point.
I have given my, no, you are not going to do that. Mute that mic. No. Mute that mic. Honorable Pambo, what is your point of order?
Speaker, I think it's really unfair to make such insinuations both by you and by that Mazotti member there, that the president of the EFF and the deputy
Point of order.
president came in late. It's utter nonsense to say that they came in late. Firstly,
you will stop right there.
Point of order.
no, Speaker, can
You
you
will
please
not
listen to
address
us?
this house
Because
and
the
tell us that
parliament,
it's
your parliament
utter
right
nonsense.
now is trying to stop the president of the EFF from holding the president of
We
the country
are not
accountable.
stopping the
It is a
president
deliberate
of the
attempt. You can
EFF.
see it. I was kicked out of this platform and was able to come back whilst the president is on the waiting room. How is that possible? If it's really technical, why am I able to be kicked out of the system and come back?
You have made your point. I have given my word unless you are saying
You have to allow the president of the EFF and the deputy president to come in. Because you are trying to shield the president of the country from
Can you
being held
please take your
accountable.
seat, Honorable Mpambo?
Point.
Honorable Mpambo, please take your seat.
I'm seated, Speaker, but I'm asking you a question now. Why are you
you want me
protecting
to
the president
address
of the
you?
country from being held accountable by the president of the EFF?
Honorable Mpambo, let me speak and rule.
Point of order, Madam
I have
Speaker.
been ruling on this matter. No single member of the National Assembly, no single member of the National Assembly will have the ability to make us stop doing what we are supposed to do today. And therefore, honorable members, I am not going to take any other point of order on this matter. I have ruled, I have had somebody call the technical people to allow everybody who is not in the house who wants to come in to be allowed in. And that is my last ruling on the matter.
Madam Speaker,
I
point
am
of
now
order.
going to any of you who is taking it on this point of order,
It's a different point
you will
of
not
order.
be allowed. I have made my final ruling on allowing this.
Madam Speaker,
I have said
it's a
that
different point
every
of
member
order.
will be allowed, but I'm not going to entertain any other point of order on this particular matter.
That's fine.
My
Speaker,
word has
can I
been given
speak?
that members must be allowed to come in onto
Okay,
the
can I speak, Speaker?
Speaker.
You are speaking on the same thing, Honorable Maude.
I'm in, Honorable Speaker.
You are in, thank you, Ndate Malema.
Can we allow the deputy president of the EFF to come in? But Speaker,
will be
my
allowed.
issue is...
Point of order, the Honorable
No,
Speaker.
I'm not taking any other
My
point of
issue
order.
is... Honorable Speaker,
Honorable Maude, I am not taking any other point of order on
but
this
I'm
matter.
not speaking on this point, I'm speaking on something else.
No.
Can you hear my point of order? You don't know what I'm going to say, Speaker. I'm
What is
saying
your
the
point of
deputy
order?
president of the EFF is supposed to take the first follow-up question. The president of the country is now responding. How is the DP going to respond to the president when he's
Honorable
outside?
Maude.
Please allow the deputy president to come in.
Honorable Maude, your deputy president is not taking the first supplementary. It is your president who's taking the first supplementary.
You don't
And
know
your
that.
deputy president will be allowed to come in. Can we proceed?
Madam
And I'm
Speaker,
not
it's
taking
Honorable
any
Mazzoni.
point of order from now onwards.
Madam Speaker, it's Honorable
as well
Mazzoni.
now, Speaker, but it
Thank
must
you,
not
Honorable Shibambo, for coming in. Honorable members, all
not
other
happen
members who
again.
are supposed to come in must be allowed in. And that is my final word on this matter.
Honorable Speaker, it's Honorable
President,
Mazzoni.
can you please take the seat?
Honorable Speaker, it's Honorable Mazzoni rising on a
Honorable
different point
Mazzoni,
of
what's your
order.
point of order?
Honorable Speaker, the Honorable member from the EFF got slightly confused. He mistook me with the EFF landlord Mazzotti. The EFF have a Mazzotti, the DA has a Mazzone, and he would be good to note the difference.
The difference is noted, Honorable Mazzoni.
No, you are a racist, man. You are a racist.
No,
No, Mr. Malema, you and Mr.
You are a
Mazzotti are
racist.
racists.
Honorable Malema, I will not have that. We will have order, we will have decorum on this platform. Honorable President, you've got the floor.
Madam Speaker,
Honorable members, anybody who I have not recognized, Mike will stay off. And that's an order to the host. Honorable President,
Madam Speaker, it's Mike Waters here on point of order.
what is the point of order, Mr. Waters?
Sorry to interrupt. The leader of the EFF called Honorable Mazzoni a racist.
I ruled him out of order.
He must withdraw it.
I ruled him out of
He
order.
must withdraw it, Madam Speaker.
Not going to
Honorable
withdraw it.
Waters, I have ruled on this matter. I want to continue with the business of the
So we
day.
can call each other racists now.
No, That is
But
why
if you're a racist, you're a racist.
You're a
He must
racist.
withdraw.
Yeah.
Can all these
Sure.
mics be muted, please? Can all these mics be muted? I want to continue the business of the day. And it is not about how well and how wonderful we can throw insults at each other, honorable members. That's not our business today. Our business is that members have put the questions to the president, and the president must be given the space to respond to those questions. Mr. President, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was saying that the struggle to end gender-based violence and femicide can only succeed if society as a whole is mobilized and organized behind a common program of action. Following the Presidential Summit against gender-based violence and femicide in November of 2018, and after extensive consultations that were held, these consultations resulted in the drafting and adoption of a national strategic plan, which was also adopted by Cabinet. The implementation of the plan commenced on 1st of May 2020. The plan recognizes that the struggle against gender-based violence and femicide requires collective as well as a cohesive strategic type of leadership. The plan provides for a governance structure in the form of a multi-sectoral gender-based violence femicide council to lead the implementation of the plan. However, even as the national plan was being drafted, we had to confront the reality that the violence that is perpetrated by men against women in our country had become a national emergency that required urgent and decisive action. It is the type of emergency which I also characterized as a second pandemic that we are having to deal with. We began the implementation of the Emergency Response Action Plan, which, as you might recall, was presented to a joint sitting of this Parliament in September of last year. Through the reprioritization of resources, we were able to allocate around 1.6 billion rand to implement the emergency response plan in the remaining months of the financial year. Working with our partners in civil society, we have managed to improve access to justice for victims and survivors and have improved our capacity to investigate as well as to prosecute gender-based violence perpetrators. For example, we have upgraded 11 sexual offenses courts and implemented a system to track the processing of GBVF-related cases. We have improved the supply of sexual assault evidence kits, which are now available in all police stations in our country. 3 amendment bills intended to strengthen the response of our criminal justice system have been approved by Cabinet and are in the process of being introduced into the parliamentary system. Among others, these bills aim to tighten bail conditions for perpetrators of sexual offenses. They also aim to strengthen parole conditions and increase minimum sentences. But they also are aimed at ensuring more severe consequences for contravening of protection orders. 5 new Tutuzela centers are to be established and will be operational by the end of March in 2021. At the same time, a major focus of our work has been on changing norms and behavior through high-level prevention efforts, such as mass media campaigns and engagements with men's groups, offenders in prison, and also youth at risk. While the emergency response plan sought to address these and other immediate issues, the National Strategic Plan guides the broader changes that we must achieve in the medium to long term. This will be led by the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide National Council. After extensive consultation, it has been decided that the National Council will consist of a board with various technical working units. In line with Article 4 of the Presidential Summit Declaration, the GBVF Council will consist of a maximum of 13 members. 51% of these members will be civil society representatives and 49% will be government representatives. The Council will be inclusive of all South Africans, including women from the urban and rural areas and different cultural and racial and class backgrounds. The members will be appointed through a transparent process of public nomination and selection. As a country, we remain determined to root out the scourge of violence against our daughters, our mothers, our sisters, our grandmothers, and our children. The National Strategic Plan is a vital guide to the many forms of interventions that we require to make our country a safe place for all, particularly women, children, and the LGBTQIA+ persons. As we work to deeply embed this plan not only across government, but across society, we will look to GBF Council to provide the vital strategic leadership in our struggle and to end this crime against women and the children of our country once and for all. I am very hopeful that the efforts that we have put in place, but efforts that have been initiated by civil society, by the women's organizations of our country, now fully supported by government, will make a great success of dealing with gender-based violence and femicide against the women of our country. This is a pandemic that we must defeat. We must bring an end to gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first supplementary question will be put by the Honorable Ms. J.M. Mufugeng.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the response, Mr. President. I'm happy that you have confirmed that the amount of 1.6 billion has been set aside to fight the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. Can the President expand on the management of the funds? Will the President be actually assuring us that the funds will be managed by the GBV Council, or will the fund be managed by the organizations, and how will the spending be monitored to ensure effective use, which is fit for purpose? I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable the President.
The various organizations that we interacted with leading up to the finalization of the National Strategic Plan insisted that we needed resources that would strengthen all our efforts to fight gender-based violence and femicide. And they insisted that the funds need to be allocated properly and they need to have line of sight of how those funds are going to be spent, how they will be managed. Now, the establishment of the council as a governance structure is also meant to have oversight over the spending of those funds and ensure that the funds are indeed spent, but for starters, that they are sourced. We started off with the reprioritization of the 1.6 billion, and we ensured that that reprioritization leads to various government departments making sure that those funds are made available, they are reprioritized, and they are set to the task that we had set out in the plan. The Council will therefore be an oversight mechanism that will make sure that those funds are indeed spent on the programs that have been set out in the National Strategic Plan. Now, when the Council is finally put in place, I am sure that they will come up with clear plans of how they will follow the money, of how the money is spent, and I'm sure that they will make sure that all that money is spent to achieve the purposes that are set out in the plan. We are committed as a government to make sure that money will be made available for this very important national task. And that is something that the Council is also working together with us. It's going to ensure and oversee. So I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that the resources that have been allocated will be properly spent. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next supplementary is by the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, let me associate myself with your opening remarks, and the side of the House associates with them. Mr. President, you have on many occasions, both inside and outside this House, made a variety of commitments to deal decisively with gender-based violence. Yet ANC actions and on-the-ground results show that gender-based violence is clearly not a priority of this government. The crime statistics released last week show very clearly that under your first term as President, the number of offences, of sexual offences and rape have increased. You've spoken about kits, but there is a catastrophic backlog in the processing of DNA tests, amounting to almost 100,000 cases, denying thousands of victims of gender-based violence recourse to justice. On the matter of gender-based violence, as with all matters of accountability with your government, you go from Mr. Talk-a-lot to Dr. Doolittle. You've made endless commitments to ending this. You've again spoken today about talk shops and funds, but these are never followed up by action. What concrete action, Mr. President, are you going to take to reduce the backlog in the DNA testing that is keeping perpetrators of gender-based violence out of jail and allowing them to continue to prey on women, children, and vulnerable people in South Africa? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steenhuisen. The Honourable the President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did say that we have made sure, after a huge backlog of not having the test kits in our police stations, we've made sure that our police stations have the test kits so that they are able, after incidents of abuse against women and young girls, that they are able to conduct those tests instantaneously. And in a number of areas in our country, those tests are immediately sent to laboratories. There has indeed been shortage of the availability of capability to test in certain provinces. The Eastern Cape is a case in point, and we are attending to that, so that the backlog that you speak about, and it does not run into hundreds of thousands, it's reduced quite substantially. We're making progress. We started off a low base, but we are making progress, and we are doing quite a lot. Now, Honourable Steenhuisen, we are being strengthened here in this effort by the partners that we are working with. The National Council is going to be an effective council that is going to ensure that all the matters that you talk about are attended. And that council is not going to be a talk shop. It's going to be a council that will have a majority membership of civil society entities across the country, and they are going to be having hawk's eyes on every effort that government needs to implement. As we speak now, a lot of progress is being made. More than 200 social workers have now been hired permanently to also attend to another critical issue, which is the psychosocial support services that are needed to be given to survivors of gender-based violence and femicide. We have also now established what we call the cold case task team, which has already started analyzing up to 785,000 dockets relating to sexual offenses. Now, this is progress. We are focusing, it's almost like a laser beam type of focus on gender-based violence, and we are making sure that we make resources available. COCTA has enrolled over 200,000 women in the Community Works Program, representing 79% of the recruits, to do work on gender-based violence. We are spreading the message. We are ensuring that we can also work on preventative measures that need to be taken. Yes, it might look like it is slow, but we are implementing the strategic plan that was drafted by the women of our country and set out in the declaration of the summit that was held in 2018. We are making steps and we are moving forward. We are not doing little, we are doing much more, and the structures that we are putting in place, especially the National Council that we have put in place, Honorable Steenhuisen, should never be seen as a talk shop. It will be a sign of disrespect to those women who are going to work in that council to be told that they are just a talk shop. They are not a talk shop, they are activists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next supplementary goes to the Honorable Mente. Mente, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker. President, you mentioning the National Strategic Plan and the Council. In the same vein, you mentioned that their success so far is about 1.5 dockets that they have analyzed. Let me remind you, yesterday or a day before yesterday, the statistics in terms of gender-based violence were standing at 28,465. And therefore, in order for all these strategies and plans not to be called a talk shop, we ought to have a structured accountability mechanism through Parliament. The Minister of Women this morning agreed that we need that structure in terms of accountability. Therefore, do you agree with the proposal that there should be a committee in Parliament that is precisely looking into the implementation of the strategic plan, the work of the council, and ensuring that all the cases that have been reported, in particular GBV, are dealt with until their finalization? Secondly, do you agree that sterilization, which was forced and coerced?
Memento? Memento is frozen.
Okay.
You were frozen.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you?
You will start where you said secondly.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Secondly, do you agree that forced sterilization and coerced sterilization on women who are HIV positive by the state is also a gender-based violence on those women? And if so, why have you not acted against the institutions that have done such atrocities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, you are reminded that you are putting a supplementary question. The Honorable, the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. With regard to the first question, in terms of enhancing accountability, I would be in agreement that on a matter like gender-based violence, we need to ensure that there is transparency, there is effectiveness, efficiency, as well as accountability. And if, to enhance accountability, members of this House believe that they should set up their own structure, I won't go as far as saying it will be a talk shop, because I think it is disrespectful to dismiss structures that are meant to deal with serious matters as talk shops. If the House itself believes that this would be the best way to go, so be it. I just want to see that the work gets done, and I'm sure that the National Council that is in the process of being set up will also be welcoming to ensure that their own work is properly looked into and that they become accountable. Coerced and forced sterilization is a violation of the basic human rights as set out in our Constitution. And anyone who participates in that has to be accountable, and so that process is truly open to anyone to take up the matter. And I actually find it quite offensive that people could be coerced and forced to sterilize, because that's a violation of a human right that is enshrined in our Constitution. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last supplementary on this question is taken by the Honorable L.L. van der Merwe.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to the President. Mr. President, it is now almost a year since you tabled your emergency plan to Parliament and promised more support for shelters, a GBV council, no bail for those accused of gender-based violence, and clearing the backlog of gender-based violence cases at forensic labs. None of these undertakings have materialized to date. You just spoke now of the employment of 200 social workers, but let me remind you of what you said on 22 June 2020, and I quote, "I want all social workers who are unemployed right now to be brought into employment," end quote. While a war is being waged against women and children in their homes and on our streets, 5,372 social workers who have been trained by the state are sitting at home, Mr. President. Can you give us a commitment with clear timeframes by when these social workers will be employed by the state? And also, Mr. President, can you give us an indication whether you've responded to the open letter written to you by the National Shelter Movement of South Africa, raising critical issues about the underfunding of shelters? And as we sit here, Mr. President, your government has not paid shelters in the Eastern Cape their stipends. And it goes without saying that we'll never win the war against gender-based violence if we don't get the basics right, such as employing social workers and funding shelters. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The issue of bail, we've raised it, and it's a matter that has to be legislated for. And as I said in my initial input, the legislative instruments are now coming into the parliamentary system, and those will have to be dealt with by members of this House. The executive has processed these matters, and it had started off with the women of our country raising the issue of bail, which we supported, and I stood on a number of platforms supporting this issue of bail. And that has taken a bit of time, I must admit, much too long than I would have wanted, to bring the matter before the executive as our Justice Department was looking at all the various legal laws that we have, it is now into the parliamentary system, and it is now up to this House to deal with the matter, and I hope that the House will deal with the matter as effectively as possible to achieve the ends and the objectives that you set out. With regard to clearing of backlogs, I did speak about this. We will admit that there are backlogs, and they are in the process of being dealt with. And the good thing is that now with the council in place, we will be able to have an institution that will ensure that the backlogs are dealt with, and they will be more focused, much more focused, to ensure that gender-based violence backlog cases are dealt with. The issue of shelters. We are building more shelters, and I actually want many more shelters than what is set out even in the program of government that we have, because these shelters, and I've visited a few, are centers of refuge for women who are violated, for women who are abused, and they are made to be the homes of those who need that type of refuge. And I'd like to see more and more of these shelters for as long as we continue having the scourge of gender-based violence. And so therefore we want to see those being speeded up. And I'm sorry to hear about the issue of the stipends. I will look into it in the Eastern Cape. If there are shelters where people have not been paid their stipends, we will need to get all the information and have that resolved. The issue of the employment of social workers is top of mind to me. There are many social workers in our country who were trained by government, and we actually saw the need for more and more social workers to be brought into the system of full employment by government during this COVID period. There are many cases that need proper attention by well-qualified professionals like social workers in our communities, and we want those social workers to be employed. And I have actually directed that we need to employ many social workers right throughout the system at local government level. That process is underway. And I'm sure that we will be talking about more social workers having been brought into the system in a few months to come. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. We proceed to the second question of the day. It is question number 8. It was put to you, Mr. President, by the leader of the opposition. Mr. President. Can you mute the Honorable SABC, please?
Honorable Speaker.
Mr. President.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. Honorable members. The allegations of corruption in the procurement of goods and services for our country's response to coronavirus has caused a lot of outrage among South Africans and amongst us also as the executive. It has also caused outrage amongst you as members of our parliament. It is disgraceful that at this time of national crisis, there are companies and individuals who seek to criminally benefit from our efforts to protect people's health and to save lives. As government, we've taken several measures, not only to detect, to investigate or prosecute such crimes, but also to strengthen the measures to prevent corrupt activities. To achieve this purpose, I have authorized the Special Investigating Unit to probe any allegations relating to the misuse of COVID-19 funds across all spheres of the state. The work of the SIU is taking place alongside the work of the recently established Special Coordination Center, which is called the Fusion Center, which brings together all the criminal justice entities to strengthen the collective efforts among law enforcement agencies to prevent, to detect, to investigate, and to prosecute COVID-related corruption. The National Treasury itself has taken effective steps to tighten procurement regulations. These measures will strengthen the ongoing work of the Auditor General to audit in real time all COVID-related expenditure. Perhaps the greatest defense against corruption in public procurement is to make the entire process much more transparent, much more open to public scrutiny as well. In an important first step towards that goal, Cabinet established a ministerial team to compile, to collate, and not to investigate, but to compile and to collate a comprehensive report on the details of all tenders and contracts awarded by national governments, or departments rather, provincial governments, and other public entities as part of the response to the coronavirus pandemic. The ministerial team was given the responsibility to ensure that the details of these tenders and contracts are made public. As to the name of those who were awarded the tenders, as to the amount they were paid, and all that type of detail. Earlier this week, the National Treasury started publishing the submissions from these various government departments and entities on their website. If you visit the National Treasury website, you will see all the names, as I have. You'll see all the names and the amounts that each one of those entities was awarded and why they were awarded, for what purpose. To date, 95% of provincial and national departments and state entities have submitted all information regarding COVID-19 procurement to the ministerial team. This initiative is unprecedented in our country's history, enabling members of the public to find detailed information about how public funds are being spent. We believe that this establishes an important precedent to future scrutiny of expenditure of this nature. In many ways, this is what I believe is a watershed moment that marks the start of a new era in transparency and accountability in the procurement of goods and services by public entities. The measures that we are taking will definitely lead to procurement reform that will ensure that we find solutions to the many procurement maladies, including corruption, as well as to ensure that government does not overpay for goods and services and actually gets good value for the money that it spends. We want to put behind us this type of culture that has emerged, where government is meant or made to overpay for various goods and services, up to, as we have read in certain publications, 800% markup and profit lining for goods that would have cost far, far, far much less. And I've always believed that government should never pay a premium. Government should always acquire goods and services at the right price and at best at a discount, because it is always a large-scale acquirer of goods and services. So I believe that we have started a process. COVID-19, yes, has been a devastating pandemic to our country in many, many ways. But below this dark cloud, we can also see a silver lining of some sorts, where from now onwards, we now need to reform our procurement system so that those who seek to defraud, to corrupt, to profiteer unfairly from what government purchases in terms of goods and services no longer have space, so that our people, because in the end, when government spends money, it is spending the people's money. It is not an individual's money. It is the people's money, and the people have an entitlement to make sure that they know what their money is spent on. So in a way, COVID-19 should therefore in the end lead to the opening up of tender processes. We need to have a process. Some of it can be technologically driven. Some of it can be driven by artificial intelligence. Some of it by blockchain. And all those technologies must now be utilized to ensure that we conserve the people's money. So COVID-19, bad as it is, will have at this stage yielded this great benefit to make sure that we draw a line in the sand, that corruption will no longer be tolerated in our country when it comes to procurement and other processes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, in a recent interview you said, and I quote, "I would rather be seen as a weak president than split the ANC," unquote. And isn't this quote precisely why you are incapable of fighting corruption? Because when the ANC is threatened, you will always put the ANC before South Africa. Now, the fish rots from the head. And if you're serious about fighting corruption, you should start by putting senior government ministers and Minister Ace Magashule, as well as others implicated, in jail. But you can't do that because you cannot split the ANC. So you'd rather be soft on corruption. And this is a systemic problem within the ANC, and it's why your party is pathologically incapable of self-correction. Now, your letter that you sent out this week was, again, a lot of talk, doing very little. No money recovered. Many of those in jail are still sitting around in Parliament and your Cabinet and your NEC. And just this week, the former mayor of eThekwini, Zandile Gumede, who is facing charges of tender fraud, exactly what you've spoken about today, was promoted into the KwaZulu-Natal legislature and will be sitting on the COGTA Portfolio Committee, exercising oversight over other municipalities. Now, you've been talking about corruption for many years, and was when you were Deputy President, when you were Leader of Government Business. Throughout Mr. Zuma's tenure, you defended him. You even went so far as to say, and I quote, about Nkandla, there was no corruption, nothing to do with Nkandla was unlawful, the fire pool is not even as big as a swimming pool. These are the lengths you've gone to put South Africa first, to put your party ahead of South Africa. Mr. President, every one of your speeches, you draw a line in the sand.
Honorable
as you've done
Steenhuisen, your
today.
time is running out and you have not put a supplementary.
But you must be using invisible ink because the line keeps getting ignored. Mr. President, do you support Zandile Gumede's elevation to the KwaZulu-Natal legislature? And if not, what are you going to do about it?
Mr. President, the honorable leader of the opposition is supposed to put a supplementary based on the response. You are at liberty, Mr. President, to answer this supplementary, which has nothing to do with the principal question that he put to you.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. I heard Honorable Steenhuisen very clearly, and he made a mini speech on this matter, as he is entitled to do. And of course, also as usual. And I respect that. And I respect his deep sentiment about corruption. And I also respect the fact that he has spoken out as a South African citizen about the concerns that he and many other South African citizens have about a number of the missteps that have happened in our country in dealing with the question of corruption. And I'm saying, and I'd like Mr. Steen, I almost call you Minister, Mr. Steenhuisen. Well, next election, maybe. I was saying to Honorable Steenhuisen, I hope he listened, because what I'm saying is that this is a moment that we now need to capitalize on in terms of ensuring that we strengthen our resolve as a nation, as a country, to fight corruption. The corruption that has happened around COVID-19 PPEs has created a huge stench in our country, and our people are justifiably unhappy, they are angry, they are demoralized, and the nation's spirit has really plummeted. And what we now need to do is to use this opportunity to deal with corruption effectively. Now, what have we been doing in government? I read a wonderful article by Mr. J.P. Landman, who actually detailed much more than what we do in government ourselves, to detail precisely the steps that we have taken since I came into office. The various steps, he detailed them, giving date and event and all that, much more than what I could ever do. And he said, we have actually turned the trajectory of dealing with corruption in South Africa. And he says these are magnificent steps coming from where we were. We have started turning this Titanic. We've really started turning it. And I would say that this Titanic, Mr. Steenhuisen, is not sinking if we look at the steps that we have taken. And now we are also saying, having noticed what has happened with COVID-19 related corruption, we are now, strengthening our resolve. For the very first time, and listen to this, for the very first time, we've got all these almost 11 agencies in government working together, looking at all acts of corruption, from a tax point of view, to a governance point of view, to every little move, whether it's money that's been moving in whatever centers, that is being looked at. And we are going to make great progress. The special investigating unit is going to do it. What I need to say, though, it is not the president's duty to arrest people. It isn't the president's duty. The day it happens, Mr. Steenhuisen, you must run for the hills. Because the day you have a president who is going to go around arresting people, investigating them, prosecuting them, putting them in jail in orange overalls, then you have no democracy. The task of the president is to make sure that we strengthen institutions, we adhere to principle, and I even say that to members of my own party. And I say, my comrades, my task as President of the Republic is not to go out and investigate this one and that one. It's to set up the institutions that will do their work. The institutions must do their work, and it is when we do so that we really have a democracy. Because one day, if you don't rely on the institutions, you will really have a crazy president who will be running around arresting people, putting them in jail, and South Africa does not want that. South Africa wants strong institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
On a point
President.
of order. On a point of order, Madam Speaker.
Supplementary supplementary.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order.
What is your point of order, sir?
Madam Speaker, you asked us 2 weeks ago to ask the tough questions. I asked the tough question. Do you support
Yes.
Mrs. Gumedi's elevation to the KwaZulu-Natal legislature or not? It's a simple yes or no.
It's a simple question. It's a simple answer. The matter is being discussed within the structures of the African National Congress. That matter, that has caused, yes, admittedly, everybody agrees it has caused quite a lot of disquiet, and the matter is being discussed within the structures of the African National Congress in a very democratic manner, and leave it to those structures to deal with the matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second supplementary question to you has been put by the Honorable Gungubele. The Honorable Gungubele.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure, Mr. President, you will agree with me that corruption needs to be suffocated before it suffocates our country. Having listened to you, it appears that from your response that a new decisive drive against corruption is in place. Now, Mr. President, taking into account that doubting Thomases will always be there, some justifiably so, what mechanisms will be at the disposal of South Africans as a tool of comfort in ensuring that this game changer is being implemented and the progress is there to see? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Gungubele. The Honorable the President.
Thank you very much. You look very different with that beard.
It looks ugly.
Honorable Mthembu, you are out of order.
During COVID, I was tempted to grow a beard to look like you, but I thought it would be too gray. Now it makes you look a little older than what you are. Matev. Thank you very much, Honorable Gungubele. Yes, we need to take this moment as a turning point in our fight against corruption. And may I say that, I've been scanning quite a number of other experiences in other countries. And I've also taken time to speak to other heads of state. And many of them are going through exactly the same challenge that we are going through. That PPEs gave people with corrupt intent, with fraudulent intent, an opportunity just to make a quick buck and overcharge government in many, many other countries. And it brought to the surface a number of hustlers, a number of fake businesses and all that. So this is a moment that we now need to deal with corruption much more seriously. And I've said that on the procurement side, I'd like to see much more transparency as a mechanism, much more openness, so that everyone can see how the goods and services that we purchase are going to be dealt with and what amounts of monies are going to be spent. And we are not saying that people must not make a profit. Of course, people must make a profit. And through this, we also want to ensure that there is radical economic transformation so that our people who have been previously prevented from getting into business are able to run businesses legitimately. We want to see that happening. But at the same time, we want public resources to be properly utilized. So the mechanisms that we will want to put in place to make sure that tender processes are properly overseen, we have a mechanism or mechanisms that are going to ensure that that happens. But at the same time, if there is any faltering along the line, the criminal justice system must be so well strengthened, so well capacitated that it is able to kick in and make sure that it deals with those who get involved in malfeasance. Now, our criminal justice entities have been shortchanged when it comes to resources. They don't have enough investigators. They don't have enough resources. And we want to resource them So that is another mechanism that we want to rely on to make sure that they are strengthened. And if we can just do that, we'll find that those who want to cheat the state will find it very, very difficult, because they will find that our institutions have been strengthened enough. For instance, we are now we're going to gravitate towards having an institution that will have investigative powers and capability, as well as prosecutorial powers when it comes to commercial crimes. What used to be called, yes, the scorpions in the past, that is what the moment we have now of dealing with commercial malfeasance and corruption now requires. We're busy looking at how we will be able to, yes, bring that back to life and make sure that you are investigated. The investigators immediately have the capability to prosecute, so that there isn't a big interregnum in between where you investigate and thereafter, much longer, you then rely on prosecutors. So when it comes to cases of corruption, we are going to be much more focused. That is another mechanism that we are going to want to use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third supplementary question will be put to you by the Honorable J.S. Malema.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Dimasiari, President. I want to dismiss this allegation you are making that you are going to revive the scorpions, because there is an ANC resolution in Polokwane that did away with the scorpions, and therefore any other thing will require something of that nature to change that earlier decision. So we shouldn't be easily misled. That is beside the point. Do you agree with me, Mr. President, that corruption in South Africa is deep-rooted to a point where even your own spokesperson was implicated in these PPE scandals? The whole office of the president has people who are involved in some of these allegations of PPE. It's a confirmation that indeed the higher office, if it's involved, you can imagine what is happening in a Blueberg municipality. But President, if you unseal the CR17 document, you make it easy for us to see if the donors of CR17 are not the beneficiaries of PPEs. You say you are fighting corruption, yet you have sealed documents which will help us to hold you and your party and your ministers accountable. So I think that it's just a lip service to say you are fighting corruption, whereas at the same time you are not telling us who donated to CR17 so that we can quickly check if these people are not beneficiaries of the PPEs. The other question is, don't you think it's time we must do away with the tendering system and build internal capacity to avoid this type of corruption, particularly on simple things such as masks? The state can produce its own mask. The last one, President, is if you are serious, you want to take action, and you want people to see that indeed the president is an anti-corruption activist, why are you not establishing the special courts like we did with 2010? Let us establish the special courts to prosecute thugs of PPEs. This is a mass murder being committed, because if they steal that man which can buy more PPEs, it means people are going to die, and people are dying in their numbers. Why are you not establishing the special court so that we arrest these people now and we avoid this mass murder? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malema. The Honorable the President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Malema. Ndiyalibuwa ngamanda ndilibuwa nanga uri bo thoma wamba nga luambo lwa hashu ndiyazilibuwa. You started off, and I'm not really going to respond to this, because the process of getting structures of government to work effectively to fight corruption has to be based on their functionality, on their capability, and if we find that, yes, there can be great functionality and capability in getting certain structures to work in a particular way, then we should be able to proceed to deal with that. I will not deal with party political conferences when it comes to this. You also touched on the spokesperson of the president, who you say was involved in all this. The spokesperson has stepped aside. We're looking into that matter, and we will be dealing with this matter once we've gone into it. The issue of the funding of what you call the CR17 funding and the donor list, that matter is in court. It is in court, and we must allow that court process to proceed. And I think we all know that sometimes to preempt what a court will rule is not often the best of things. And I hear now the allegation you make that those who may well have donated were involved in PPE contracting. I don't know about that. You bring up a very good suggestion that maybe we should do away with the tendering system. But you also say that it should be supported or underpinned by what you possibly could call insourcing, that we should make our own PPEs. And that, Honorable Malema, is a very good suggestion, but we would also say it should be based on localization, because government right now does not have the capability of making masks, of making PPEs, but we want to ensure that those PPEs are made here in South Africa and that black companies get involved in making those PPEs. I have been wonderfully, wonderfully impressed when I've seen a number of women making masks, face masks, and sewing them, and the sewing process has just started unleashing a lot of energy around the country with many women and many co-ops being involved in making PPEs. Now, that is what we must encourage. But we're also saying that we must be able to buy those at a fair price. Yes, there must be a markup, they must make a profit so that they can make a living, but at the same time, the profits must not be excessive. I would agree with you that we now need to look at the tendering system as a whole, because a lot of services and processes have been outsourced to tenderpreneurs. There now needs to come a time when we need to look at this, and I know that COSATU and other trade unions are beginning to ask themselves a lot of questions around this. Should we be outsourcing everything to tenderpreneurs, or should we also be saying, yes, many things can be done in-house in the government by people who are in the government system. And in many ways that will help and lead to the strengthening of the state capacity. You raised the question of special courts. You'll be pleased to know, Honorable Malema, that we're looking at this issue of courts that will focus on COVID-19. And I will be speaking about this in time to come, because we do need to deal with the backlog. Many of our courts have huge backlogs when it comes to cases of corruption and commercial corruption and what have you. And we now need, as we have to deal with the scourge of corruption, we now need to deal with them in a specialized manner. So we will be focusing attention on this, and I will be speaking about this in time to come. But thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last supplementary of this question will go to the Honorable Groenewald.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable President, when you became the President of the Republic of South Africa, you said we are entering a new dawn, and you declared war on corruption. Now, a couple of years down the line, we must hear that the ANC is accused number one. And it's no wonder, because you are also on record that you said that the interest of the ANC is actually above the interest of South Africa. when you announced the support package of 500 billion because of the COVID-19, you are on record, Honourable President, when you said, we will ensure that there is no misappropriation of these funds. By making that announcement, you created the message and the impression to the people of South Africa that you knew about the possibility of corruption and that you took certain measures. Now, my follow-up to you is, what measures did you have in mind and did you implement when you made this announcement to the people of South Africa? Because if you didn't have the measures there, then you misled the people of South Africa. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Groenewald. The Honourable the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I do not, Honourable Groenewald, ever remember saying that the interests of the ANC are above the interests of South Africa. They certainly are not. South Africa comes first because that is the entity that we all pay our allegiance to. When I was sworn in as president, I was sworn in to advance the interests of the people of South Africa. And that is what I am committed to doing. I was not sworn in to advance the interests of a party. I was sworn in to advance the interests of the people of South Africa. What will I do to ensure that we have measures that are going to prevent corruption? And what measures did I have in mind? As we went into the process of setting aside this 500 billion, which, by the way, many people believe that the 500 billion, the entire 500 billion has been stolen. That is far from the truth. Far, far from the truth. What has actually been spent on PPEs, as per the Treasury records, is about 11 billion rand. And much of that money has gone into buying PPEs. And as the cases get reported, firstly to me, in terms of, how was the malfeasance, we will get to know precisely what the actual amounts of this malfeasance are. It is not 500 billion. I needed to clarify that. What measures did we have in mind? Yes, indeed, there were those who feared. Trade unions feared, the churches feared that, and various parties feared that there could be measures or acts of malfeasance. And they did express them publicly. It was not so much of what I feared myself, but it was expressed by many institutions in our country. And what measures did we take? I made sure that I go to that one institution that would be able to have great scrutiny, and that was the Auditor General. Went to the Auditor General and had a discussion with the Auditor General, and the Auditor General said that they have mechanisms of making sure that, yes, we do have a preventative type of approach. And indeed, the Auditor General's office has sought and tried to ensure that many of those that could have even gone worse were stopped along the way. But they did still happen. And they happened in a way that where people had contacts in various offices, contacts with certain people and all that, and it all seemed to be okay. And when it came to overpricing, it is something that should have been looked at more closely, but it wasn't. And yes, there was system failure when it came to that, but it is something that we have learned great lessons from. We've learned enormous lessons, and it is for this reason that I say we must take this COVID-19 moment as a moment when we now enter a new era in as far as dealing with corruption goes. It has cost us a lot, but at the same time, we need to say we are drawing the line in the sand, and we are now going to have a system where we have a procurement reform, where our reform process is completely different from what we have had, so that the thieves, the thugs, and those who want to corrupt do not find an easy way of being able to abuse state resources. So there was no misleading of the public on my part. I actually did make sure that we allocate the money, but having done so, to say that the money needs to be managed in as best a manner as we possibly can. And the mechanisms that we have in place, yes, some of them may well have failed in terms of checking whether the prices were right or not. Treasury also played a key role in making sure that the malfeasance is not as widespread as it could have been. So many efforts were made, but there was still failure of the system, which is exactly what we are now going to correct. And correct it we shall, because we are determined to ensure that we obliterate corruption in our land. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes the responses to question number 8. We proceed to question number 9. That question was put to you by the Honorable Misuse. Mr. President.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. Honorable members, as indicated in my reply to the previous question, Cabinet, yes, established this ministerial committee that I was talking about, which is led by Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Lamula, to compile details of all COVID-related procurement of all government bodies so that these can be made public. Cabinet's intention in doing so was aimed at enhancing and promoting transparency and accountability. And this was so because we got a sense that the public was so enraged by what had happened that they wanted more information. They wanted to know what had happened. And it is for that reason that Cabinet established this entity so that it can collate and compile. This process is distinct and unrelated to the work of the Special Investigating Unit in investigating any unlawful or improper conduct in the procurement of goods and services in any state institution. The SIU has not made any request to Cabinet for assistance in gathering details of COVID-related tenders and contracts. And in fact, they don't need permission. The SIU will be able to do its work without any hindrance, without any prejudice, and without any favor. According to the proclamation I signed on the 23rd of July, the SIU, to authorize it to probe any allegations, it is enabled to do precisely that. The SIU is empowered by the SIU and Special Tribunals Act of 1996 to gather all necessary evidence required in the fulfillment of their mandate. If the SIU finds evidence that a criminal offense has been committed, it is obliged to refer such evidence to the prosecuting authority. It is also empowered to institute civil proceedings for the recovery of any damages or losses incurred by the state. Government is determined to ensure that all criminal acts related to our response to COVID-19 pandemic are uncovered and that those responsible are held to account. And I must tell you that this is what our people want, this is what they expect, this is what they deserve, and this is what they demand. And we are going to live up to our people's expectations. We will make sure that all is let out to hang in public, because it is their money after all. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Honorable Misuse.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. President, for the reply. Before I ask my follow-up question, I want to disagree with you. When you said the Titanic is not sinking, I want to assure you, Mr. President, the Titanic is sinking. The SIU that we believe is determined to recover all the monies that were acquired illegally has had many successes in the past few years. The ACDP therefore supports their request for more resources to be able to do their work with much more success. The ACDP further has been in the forefront of calling for additional funds for the SIU. Now, given our economic conditions, will you, Mr. President, make additional efforts to ensure that you find resources that the SIU has requested? We believe further that money that government will spend in the additional resources that are requested by the SIU will be a drop in the bucket compared to the billions of rands that the SIU and other law enforcement agencies will recover. So I would urge the President that move every stone to ensure that additional finances are found, because these agencies have done South Africa well in recovering stolen monies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ntate Misuse. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I will not go into the polemics about the Titanic. We will leave that to history, and you and I can discuss that one day over prayer. Honorable Misuse, I'd like to acknowledge, truly acknowledge, the compliment that you are paying to the SIU. But I also want to acknowledge the support that you are offering to the SIU. It is an important institution of our government to fight corruption. You are absolutely right that they are under-resourced. They need more resources. They have communicated that much to myself, to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, who has come forward with the needs that not only the SIU has, the NPA, the Hawks, and all of them, and said, President, these are the financial needs of these institutions. And you are absolutely right that the money that we can make available to these institutions will be a droplet in the bucket compared to the money that we are going to gain back when the SIU tribunal claims back various amounts of money. So they do need to be resourced. You want to know whether I will support that? Most definitely. I support that they should be well-resourced, because they have proven, even in difficult times, but more particularly now, in this new era of seeking to fight corruption. Yes, this new dawn of seeking to fight corruption, that they are up to the task. They have been doing as well as you have articulated, and they need to be supported, and we will support them. So I'm glad to know that I have your vote when it comes to this. So when we talk to the Minister of Finance, we'll tell him that, yes, I'll call you. Maybe you and I will go together. Thank you very much, Honorable Misuse. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second supplementary comes from the Honorable Nivot Druchen. The Honorable Druchen.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the Honourable Speaker. And thank you very much to the Honourable President. This follow-up question was originally prepared by our former comrade, Hisham Mohammed, and I would like to extend our condolences to his friends. Mr. President, thank you for your response. Are there any timeframes for the Ministerial Committee that is led by our Minister Lamola? Are there any time frames to conclude their mandate? That is the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Tuchen. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The committee that is led by Minister Lamola has a very short time frame. It is a focus committee, task focus committee. It is not an investigative committee. It is a committee that is gathering information, collating information. When they last reported to me, they had done almost 90% of the work. They were waiting for more information. And as soon as the work is collated, it is upflighted on the Treasury website together, obviously, with the work that is done by the Treasury. And so their time frame is limited, and the work that they are doing is being made apparent and public as we move on, because it is being placed on the Treasury website. But they will give a final report, which will also be made known to everyone. They are meant to collate the information and make sure that we know exactly what has been happening with the procurement processes. And other agencies like the SIU, like Treasury, will continue to do their work. It was just this that we needed to clear the decks on from the executive side, that we needed to put in that committee in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third supplementary goes to the Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my concern is, why do you sound so surprised and shocked at the looting of state coffers with this procurement challenges we have in the time of this disaster? I personally have highlighted over 20, 30 or 40 times in the House that we lose over 200 to 240 billion rand a year as a result of procurement in South Africa. The former chief procurement officer said 40% on goods and services is what we lose annually, Mr. President, in South Africa. Now, I see a lot of discussion is going around dealing with SIU, putting in this commission, that billions of rands are getting spent. Don't you think the solution, Mr. President, is to close that gap? And one of the ways is, yes, indeed, the tender system needs to be open, needs to be transparent, but after it is awarded, it needs to be advertised that so-and-so company received that tenders, supplied examination pads at 9 Rand 19, and then you can see that you're not paying 200 Rand for those things there. So we need to find solutions to prevent this corruption rather than allowing it to take place, leaving the loopholes there and then spending billions of Rand, which we're not recovering, Mr. President. So I would urge you, Mr. President, and I welcome the commission or the committee that you have put, but together with that, let us work together to put in measures. Can you tell us whether you will be willing, Mr. President, to investigate procurement for the last 10 years in this country? And I promise you, you will find 3 trillion Rand, Mr. President, to make South Africa a debt-free country. I promise you that.
Thank you, Honorable Imam Sheikh. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It's not so much that I was shocked. It is much more a process of saying we need to redouble our efforts to fight corruption and to make sure that we rid our country of this cancer and this virus I call corruption. Now, clearly, this COVID moment, as I say, has given us leverage, the opportunity to usher in a new era, to bring about a new and a reformed procurement system that will be underpinned by a number of elements. And those elements should be preventative measures. And this is where the Auditor General is very strong, and his work is absolutely necessary. And working together with all these other structures, we will be able to come up with a much more effective and realigned procurement system. So we need reforms. Prevention should underpin that. Transparency should also underpin a new and a reformed procurement system. But it should also be underpinned by good governance. The good governance should include oversight of some sort, oversight by various people and entities that will make sure that when tenders are given, there is that type of oversight. And the transparency and openness must, in the end, be able to close all loopholes, that those who win tenders should know that information about their entities, about themselves, will be made public, and it should be competitive bidding. It should not be closed tenders, as we have tended to see in the past. It should be open tenders where everyone should know that they can bid. Another key element, as I've said, should be the utilization of technology. Technology in the form of artificial intelligence, blockchain, and digital technologies. And if we can utilize these, we will be able to curb corruption, so that be it civil servants, be it political leaders, be it whoever, should know that any form of corrupt activity or intervention will be exposed, will be stopped, and will be found out. So I think we've entered that type of era to reform our procurement system, and I am putting a lot of confidence and hope in the utilization of technologies. Now, many countries that have brought in technology in their procurement system have used it to good effect. I know of companies that have not only solved their procurement woes, but they've also reduced costs. Now, you talk about we lose 40% of what we procure annually. We will be able to reduce this if we rely on technology and artificial intelligence. And we're now going to start a process in government to move in that direction, from national, provincial, as well as local level. Because this is a technological age, we cannot continue utilizing procurement systems that belong to the ice age. We must explode into the technological age and utilize the most effective methods of dealing with corruption. And in that way, it is fair, it is empowering, it will be able to achieve the objectives that we seek, empowering the women of our country. As we've said, we want 40% of procurement processes to empower the women of our country. We want young people to benefit, and we want black entrepreneurs and companies to benefit. So all that will be easily much more achievable when we use technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last supplementary on this question goes to the Honorable Singh. Dada Singh.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we heard that Advocate Mohammed was to ask a follow-up question, and we know he passed on sadly, and may his soul rest in peace. But I think we owe it to people like him and to our founding fathers and to seasoned Member of Parliament and campaigner against corruption, Honorable Prince Buthelezi, who celebrates his 92nd birthday today, that we arrest this pandemic of corruption. Now, Mr. President, it's laudable that company names are being made public, but behind these names are faces. Now you hear of XYZ company, ABC, PTY Limited. Who are the owners and directors of this company? That's something that needs to be revealed. And the second thing, Honorable President, I still make an appeal to you to go back to my old hobby horse, that please do not exclude in your basket of options of dealing with corruption the establishment of a Chapter 9 Integrity Commission, independent, free from politics, that will not only investigate but suggest remedial action to all the thieves who are robbing poor taxpayers of their money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. The Honorable the President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Singh. I join you in wishing Umtwana Babushenge his wonderful birthday, and we were pleased to hear that he had recovered from COVID-19, and we continue to wish him strength as he continues to play the elder statesman in the body politic of our country. Yes, you're absolutely right. As we fight corruption, we should not only be focusing on the names of the entities, but we should also be focusing on the faces behind those entities. And that is precisely what we are going to be drilling into. The various institutions that we have set up in what we call the Fusion Center have the capability to do precisely that. The work that is being done by the FIC, the work being done by SARS, work being done by the SIU, work being done by the Hawks, and all these entities is going to probe so deeply as to be able, yes, to fathom the depth of the origins and the roots of all these companies. So I think, as I say, we've entered a new era. This has not happened before in our country, and we've now broken into a new direction, and I'd like all of us, much as we are enraged by what has happened, to join the work that is being done by all these institutions, to support them, better still. Let us support them and ensure that they are strengthened, and as we heard earlier, if they can be given all the resources that are necessary, it will actually be the best thing that could happen to them. Because as Reverend Misuse said, if they can be given those resources, they will be able to do precisely what you are suggesting, Honorable Singh. As to setting up another institution, what Honorable Steenhuisen calls another talk shop, it's a matter that I think we need to look at a later stage. Let us consolidate what we are seeking to do now, to ensure that we consolidate the importance of this moment and make sure that these institutions that we seek to strengthen do their work. And once they have started doing their work effectively with greater strength, without any fear or favor or prejudice, we should then see precisely how we can strengthen their work even more. But for now, I agree with you, we need to look at the origins, the roots of all these entities much more closely. And thank you very much for the suggestion as well. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. We proceed, Mr. President, to the question that was put to you by Honorable Abraham, question number 10. Mr. President.
Honorable Speaker, the effect of the coronavirus pandemic on economies of many countries around the world has been quite severe. Like most other countries, we've had to confront the effects of a massive global slowdown when it comes to demand and supply, and a dramatic decline in our own local economy activity. As our economy has suffered from the effects of the pandemic, as well as the measures we've taken to contain its spread, we've also had to mobilize additional resources to mount an effective public health response and support companies, workers, and households that COVID-19 has put under a great deal of distress. The supplementary budget tabled by the Minister of Finance on the 24th of June therefore proposed significant increases in expenditure in the context of falling revenues. As a consequence of our decisive and absolutely necessary response to this pandemic, government debt is expected to reach 3.9 trillion rand in 2020-2021. This does not include the debt of state-owned enterprises. If not addressed over the medium term, the cost of servicing this debt will consume much of the savings accumulated in the economy each year. This would severely damage private investment as well as economic growth, reducing the revenues on which government spending plans depend on. This could mean that spending programs that we have in government in a variety of departments are overwhelmed by debt obligations. During the current MTEF period, for example, debt service costs are expected to exceed total spending on healthcare alone. Since the economy and the fiscus were already weak prior to the current crisis, the starting point for ensuring fiscal stability is to close the gap between government spending and tax revenue. In undertaking this task, somebody got shocked. In undertaking this task, government has adopted an active approach to managing the country's debt. It is committed to an active set of fiscal and economic reforms to raise confidence and growth as well. This includes faster implementation of the economic reforms that are needed to support investment, as well as employment, to raise productivity and competitiveness, and to lower the cost of living and the cost of doing business. These reforms will include the finalization, which is in process, of electricity determinations, going on with the restructuring process of ESCOM, and other steps to open up energy markets, the modernization of our ports, which is speeding ahead, our rail infrastructure, which is going to commence in a meaningful way, and licensing of high-demand spectrum, which is going to happen. Under the active scenario, which requires a program of fiscal restraint, we anticipate a small surplus in the primary balance, which is the difference between non-interest spending and revenue in 2023 and 2024. Debt by then should stabilize at around 87% of GDP, after which it would gradually start declining. Those are the projections. The active scenario prevents debt service costs from continuing to rise faster than all other items of spending for the foreseeable future. In this way, it prevents an outcome where South Africa's debt costs are higher than all other expenditure. Sovereign debt crisis causes investors to leave the country, and the country has to seek large bailouts from other lenders. To the degree possible with limited resources, government continues to support the implementation of the priorities outlined in the government's medium-term strategic framework of 2019 to 2024. New and urgent government priorities have been funded through the reallocation of budgets within and across functions. Improving efficiency, meaning that government will have to do more with less, has become a necessity. For example, more will need to be done using communication technology instead of spending money on accommodation and subsistence, as well as travel costs. And in many ways, this COVID moment has presented us with new ways of doing things, where we can actually utilize this moment, however long it will last, to save as much resources as we possibly can and redirect those resources to where they are most needed. And that is possibly that silver lining below that COVID cloud that we must exploit and utilize to good effect. Government remains committed to improving education and health outcomes and reducing poverty, as shown by the size of allocations to the learning and culture and health and social development functions over the medium term. The economic recovery and reconstruction plan that is being developed by government alongside its social partners will ensure that resources are directed to infrastructure and employment creation programs. And I must say that I'm very pleased with the work that is being done with the social partners, and I've given them a tight time frame to finalize what will be the recovery and reconstruction plan for our country going forward. Because that is what we must pivot our hopes on to get out of this COVID moment of bringing our economy down as it has. Alongside urgent structural reforms, such as investments, will lay a firm foundation for the return to economic growth and job creation. This in turn will increase public revenue, allowing government to reduce the budget deficit and lower its exposure to debt. That is the approach that we want to have, and those are the pillars on which our recovery is also going to be based. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first supplementary goes to the Honorable Abrahams. The Honorable Abraham.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable President, the carefully outlined response is much appreciated. Thank you for taking the nation into confidence, not only here and now, but in briefings that are now fondly known as family meetings nationwide. Research shows that in many instances, it is not the lack of funds that hampers economic growth and development. It's sometimes the poor quality of spending, the lack of capabilities in the state to drive implementation, working together with social partners, wastage and corruption, and lack of investment in the sectors that grow the economy, such as the infrastructure. With the National Infrastructure Plan, Honorable President, how far is government with its implementation? And Honorable Speaker, I would like also the President to speak on how the loopholes on tax evasion and symphonic loot of state funds and corruption will be stopped. I wish at this point, Honorable Speaker, to wish Utata Ubuthelezi a very happy birthday. May God bless the old man. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honorable, the President.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, indeed, we've had challenges that we are addressing that we have to address, such as the lack of spending that we have seen on a number of programs, the capability of the state to implement a number of programs, the wastage that has bedeviled our ability to have good service delivery, and the corruption, and also the lack of infrastructure. And we can add on to that list because it is quite a long list. But we are determined to turn things around, to address precisely all these issues, and to ensure that we infuse greater capability in the state, and in many ways we should do so by eradicating corruption, because corruption impedes better capability in the state. But it also weakens democracy, it also weakens state institutions. And by dealing with corruption, we will also be able to deal with the issue of wastage. But we also want to inject a new sense of patriotism in our officials so that they put the interests of our country first and the people first rather than their own personal interests. And with the various mechanisms that we are going to put in place and that we are putting in place, we should be able to get precisely to that. How far are we with the implementation of our infrastructure plans? We are just a few months away from pressing the button on project or shovel-ready projects. The office in the presidency that has been looking at infrastructure has done an enormous amount of work, supported by the Public Works and Infrastructure Department, and we are hopeful that the work that is being done by Dr. Ramaphosa, supported by Minister De Lille, is going to go to a long extent in making sure that our infrastructure program does take off. We were able, during even the COVID period, to have as many as 2,000 would-be investors globally looking at the infrastructure built potential of our country, ranging from building dams, roads, rail network, and a whole lot of other infrastructure projects. And this has been like countrywide, with all our provinces involved in the various projects that need to be done. We've gone through a really thorough going process. There was a delay, which I bemoaned, in the setting up of the infrastructure fund, which I spoke about on this very platform almost 2 years ago. That fund has now been set up. A lot of private sector entities are showing a great deal of interest. And this is where we are now going to be having a situation where the private sector and the public sector will work together. The recovery program that we are going to be putting out in time to come is going to be pivoted around the infrastructure. We're relying a great deal on infrastructure build because I see that as the real engine and the flywheel of getting our economy to begin the recovery process with a lot of job creation, public employment as well, and focusing on a number of sectors of our economy and getting them to start work again. And we will then want South Africa to go back to work in the most effective way. Issues such as tax evasion, corruption, are going to be part of the package of looking at how we reposition our country in terms of its attractiveness to investors. Because it is when we focus on corruption and we rid our country of corruption that investors will also pay attention to what we are doing here. So much of what you're talking about, we are now going to focus on and reduce wastage, infuse greater capability in the state, deal with corruption, and begin the infrastructure build. An infrastructure build will also include the maintenance of current infrastructure, because much of our infrastructure is in need of maintenance, and we want to bring the army of young people to be properly trained in skills that are going to be able to help with the maintenance of our infrastructure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second supplementary goes to the Honorable Shivambu.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. Now, President, South Africa's debt obligations currently stand at more than 200 billion rands annually, which is servicing the interest of more than 3.7 trillion rands that is owed by the state to different financial institutions. What this means is that government expends more than 200 billion to pay for debt services. And that is more or less the same amount we spend on social grants and healthcare as we have admitted today. What is the logic and the wisdom of borrowing a dollar-dominated loan of 100 billion from the IMF and other financial institutions, which effectively will be swallowed by the 200 billion debt services costs, will be drowned into the COVID-19 procurement corruption, which is not 11 billion as we claim today, and will be ballooned due to the currency fluctuations. What is worse is that the IMF debt will not be repaid on record time, and conditionalities will kick in, and then therefore undermining the country's fiscal and monetary policy sovereignty. And this will remain with South Africa for a very long time, even after you have left your position as President of the Republic in 2023. And lastly, if these fictional investments that we speak about, private investments that we speak about every day were real, we wouldn't be in a recession that we're experiencing now, which is not solely blamed on COVID-19 pandemic. But there is no wisdom on taking money from the IMF, a dollar-dominated loan, when you've got debt service costs of 200 billion. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable the President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. When COVID befell us, already our fiscal position was quite challenged. But as it befell us, we found that we needed more resources. And as we looked around, we did know that we would need to get an injection of loan finance, be it from the local market or indeed from the international market. And as we trawled all these sources of finance which we needed, we found that there were possibly principally four. The one was the African Development Bank, which was willing to give us a dollar-denominated loan, something like $1 billion, if I recall. The other one was the New Development Bank, the BRICS Bank, which was willing to give us a loan of $1 billion, which would translate to 18 billion rand at an exchange rate at the time, dollar denominated as well. The other was the World Bank. Now with the World Bank, they had an allocation of about $900 million. And the IMF, and we've been members of the IMF since 1945. We also have the governor of our Reserve Bank as one of the chairs of a key committee in the IMF. The IMF, as COVID hit, was able to allocate funding to all the countries, to many countries in the world, to make sure that they deal with COVID-19. Somehow, the whole world knew, including those institutions, that COVID-19 was going to result in great difficulties and challenges for various countries in the world. And they were willing to make an allocation, and we are, as a member of the IMF, entitled to it, of $4.2 billion. And many other countries on the continent and elsewhere also got their allocations. We looked very closely at the cost structure of all these loans, including loans that we continue to acquire in our own local market. And the IMF one came at 1.1%. With a loan of 1.1%, with conditionalities that were not the usual conditionalities that, or conditions, I should say, in simple English, the usual conditions that they attach to loans, like structural reforms. We felt that we could actually take advantage of the low interest rate of this type of loan, and also know that it's not going to be a long-term type of loan. And it was focused on COVID-19, precisely the resources that we needed. And we discussed it extensively. There was an aversion in our country about getting a loan from the IMF because of the history that the IMF has had in imposing adverse conditions on many developing countries around the world. And we took a view that we would not subject ourselves to conditions that would compromise and sacrifice our own sovereignty as a nation. We were quite clear about that. And in fact, I should give credit to officials in our various government departments, particularly Treasury, because in a number of loans or funding that we could have acquired for a number of projects, mega projects, they were the ones who rejected and continued to reject adverse conditions. And we've continued to do precisely that. The other day, Minister of Finance was telling me that the World Bank loan, they were attaching conditions that we could not accept. And we agreed that we would, yes, reject that, and they were still negotiating. So when it comes to conditions that would be adverse and sacrifice our sovereignty, we draw the line and say no. When it comes to loans that would give us the lowest interest charge, we've tended to say we can go for cheap money that would help us achieve the objectives that we have, knowing fully well that we are not going to be sucked in or compromise our sovereignty. And it is on that basis that we did, after much discussion in a variety of places, including the governing party, that we did say we will, yes, accept this because of what is our challenges at the moment and what is on offer in terms of the interest charge. I don't believe that the interest charge is so adverse that we will not be able, if you look at the matrix that I spoke to, we should be able to reduce our debt and be able to start showing positivity once our economy begins to recover. And our economy, yes, has been scaling down over a number of years. And much of it has been with the world economic conditions, but much of it has been our own faults, which we are now correcting. We've identified them. We're now embarking on a vigorous process of reforms, but at the same time we are saying we are not going to abandon the path of making sure that we safeguard the interests of our people when it comes to the programs that are going to support their lives. So, Honorable Shibambo, yes, you may have this negative disposition towards this entity called the IMF, but we have said this is an allocation. Well,
I'm sorry, Mr. President, please proceed.
well, I was about to say a young child out there is very appreciative of what I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third supplementary goes to the Honorable Swart.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Honourable President. And I think just your comment, President, about the youngster on the show now is humorous, but at the same time it does indicate we need to be careful of intergenerational debt. And you have correctly alluded to the almost 4 trillion rand debt and the need to borrow funds internationally, which is regrettable, but we appreciate the fact of the 70 billion IMF loan at 1.1%, which is very favorable terms. However, it did require commitments in the form of a letter intent from the country, signed by the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Reserve Bank. Honourable President, one needs to understand that to what degree do those commitments, are they conditionalities? And Honourable President, the question is, what impact will the recent revelations about the COVID-19 corruption, as well as other challenges facing our nation, such as power supply constraints, have on our standing with international investors and international finance institutions, and our compliance with the letter of intent, given that that particular rapid financing instrument was provided to finance COVID-19 expenditure. So obviously there's a great concern from those institutions as to the corruption allegations, when seen against the backdrop of additionally prior to COVID-19, state capture and corruption, as we see with the Zonda Commission. And may I just say, President, commend you on the amendment of those regulations for the Zonda Commission. That is, as the NPA has said, a game changer, and it does indicate a commitment to fight corruption. So I thank you for that as well, President.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Mr. Swart. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Swart. When it comes to the letter that has had to be signed by the Minister of Finance and the Central Bank Governor, it is a letter that sets out obviously a number of conditions. It is just like when you go to a bank and you go borrow money, they will have certain conditions. And the conditions will range from things like you cannot spend much more money than what you earn, you cannot do this and you cannot do that. And of course they will say that. They will say that we hope that you will be able to reduce your debt over time. And it's not an onerous commitment to make, because that's what we want to do. Many of the things that are set out in the letter is precisely what we know we have to do. And they would say, we would like you to go on with the reforms. It's not like an instruction from them that you shall do this. We say, these are things that we are committed to doing. We have a program of reforming our, if you like, our network industries, our rail, our energy, our water, and all that. Those are the network industries that we have to reform. So when they raise it in the letter, it's not like an instruction from them. It's what we want to do, to reduce our debt. And also to live within our means is precisely what we should do, is the prudent things that we should do. There may well be one or two conditions that could raise eyebrows. I'm quite prepared to say that, but it is not so debilitating that you would say no to getting a 1.1% loan. So it's not sacrificing our sovereignty. We're not, selling the silver of the country and all that. So yes, we've had to agree to that, but what is the impact of what we are going through, the corruption, for instance? Yes, of course. I mean, in the letter, they may well have said, we would like to see you fight corruption. It's what we want to do. So it's a, if you like, a nice condition. It may sound bad that it is being raised by somebody else, but it's just as good as if you go to a bank and they say, we want you to make sure that you do this and that, and then you say, okay, you are not going to buy a Rolls Royce. You will agree that I will not buy a Rolls Royce and all that. So in the end, in terms of compliance, we intend to comply. We intend to do what is right for ourselves as a country and the people of our country. And they will obviously be looking at the steps we take to curb corruption. Obviously, they don't want to see the wheels falling off the country. They will want to make sure that indeed we will fight corruption and we will work within the parameters that are set out in our covenants, in our laws, and everything else. They will want to see that, yes, we are going to upgrade our power facility, that Eskom will be properly managed, that we will go on with the reforms or with the restructuring in Eskom, and all those things. They are not things that are so negative that they would cause us to believe that they are interfering with our sovereignty. These are things that we will do. So in the end, I would be able to say to you, yes, they have not been sort of discouraged to go ahead with the loan because of the corruption. They have noted, of course, as they often do, because they have their representatives here and they watch our economy on a daily basis, and they watch all the indices and the indicators like they do with any other country, but they have not been discouraged from going ahead with this. Now, question would be asked, many people have often said, shouldn't you have looked elsewhere? Shouldn't you have gone to find money in the PIC, in this other body and this other body? And we say, those entities obviously have their own governance structures, and to make an allocation of 74 billion rand is not an easy matter. And if we get it as a 1.1% loan, it becomes something that we can work with. So it is for that reason that we have, and we will, on a compliance basis, be able to comply, to meet the compliances that they've set out, because they are not onerous, they are not being imposed on us. These are things that we need to do ourselves and move on and reform South Africa so that we have an economy that can function better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last supplementary on this question goes to the Honorable E.M. Buthelezi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, Honorable President. As we are all aware that some of the things that have exposed our country into such a debt is our economy does not grow, and the serious problem of corruption, it does not only steal from the poor, but also deepens poverty. We have heard the President making so many undertakings in terms of tackling corruption and your invitation to the nation to lend their hand. But what we continue to see, Honorable President, can we conclude and say the President is failing to fight corruption, or what we see is a clear act of sabotage to your commitment of tackling corruption from your colleagues in both government and your party? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ntati Buthelezi. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I don't want to be singing the praises of this writer, J.P. Landman, but I do want people to look at what he wrote, because much more than anything, it's also a very technical type of assessment of what we have done. And as I said, much more in depth than what I myself would ever have done, even if I were to sort of praise government or myself. But he outlines exactly what we have done. And if one looks at a number of steps that we have taken and looks at them objectively, and looks at
Please proceed, Honorable.
And looks at the impact of some of those measures, you will find that we have made strides. We have made progress. And it's obviously progress that has not hit the bright lights of the front page of newspapers, and it's not the progress that has immediately resulted in what people wanted to see happening of, the arrests and people going to prison and all that. But it's been more institutional reform type of progress. Progress where we're repositioning a lot of these institutions, and many of them had been compromised. Many of them had been captured. Many of them had been debilitated and disempowered. And they are beginning to come back into their own and beginning to function as the proud institutions of our country. And to the extent that I would say one has failed to deal with corruption, I think one needs to look at what has been done in that sort of sector of repositioning various institutions. And one will find that, yes, there has been progress, so there hasn't been failure there. And I think we need to give those institutions the time and the space to continue doing their work. And you talk about, yes, there's been possibly either sabotaging or whatever. I wouldn't say that that is the issue. Of course, a number of those institutions may still well have people who still want to put the brakes on, who still want to ensure that things don't happen in the way that those institutions should work. It is possible. And of course, people who have benefited from corruption, benefited from state capture, are the ones who are going to fight back much harder, much more vociferously, because the well-functioning of any institution is the type that they fear most. And all we want, and all the people of our country want, is to have institutions that function well, institutions that will fulfill their mandates, and institutions that will not have people who will work in a way that favors certain other interests and certain other people. We want institutions that will work without any fear, favor, and without prejudice. Because once we get our country back to that, then there is no sabotaging, then there is no diversion, there is just focus in getting our country back to work. And that, Honorable Buthelezi, is precisely what I'm committed to doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question, question number 11, was put to the President by the Honorable Mahau. My instructions are that the Honorable Zungula is the caretaker. The Honorable the President.
Honorable Speaker, the unemployment crisis in our country has been dramatically deepened by the economic effects of COVID-19. We are therefore called upon to use every means at our disposal to rebuild our economy, to protect existing jobs, but also to create new ones. This means, among other things, that we need to look at issues of migration, employment, and economic activity. As we do so, we should avoid populist temptations to blame our unemployment crisis on foreign nationals working in our country, either legally or illegally. By the same measure, we need to understand, as South Africans, that we must respond to the frustrations by our own people, by South Africans, at the violation of immigration laws and other regulations, by those companies that employ foreign nationals illegally. To ensure a coherent, sustainable solution to these challenges, Cabinet has established an interministerial committee on the employment of foreign nationals, convened by, he says he didn't say anything, convened by the Minister of Employment and Labor and co-chaired by the Minister of Home Affairs, because the two ministers on a daily basis deal with these issues of migrant people who come and leave our country. This IMC will deal with the migration of foreign nationals for employment and related opportunities. The IMC will provide guidance on matters such as existing labor supply agreements, trade relations, and transportation agreements. It will also address criminality and related security matters across our borders. The IMC will also review decisions on special dispensation work permits, amendments to our Immigration Act, Employment Services Act, and Labor Migration Management. The committee will also need to ensure that our approach to the employment of foreign nationals provides and addresses the issue of scarce critical skills that we need to grow our economy. Now, this committee's work is being looked forward to with great anticipation by all of us in government, because in the end, we do need to deal with this challenge that our people always talk about, the challenge of foreign nationals who are here in great numbers in our country, and we need to deal with it properly, politically, and we need also to deal with it historically.
Please mute Honorable Mutambis.
Precisely what we are going to do. So when this work is done and completed, Cabinet will be able to reflect on this matter and be able to possibly even get public participation in whatever option that we are going to come about with. And it is in this where, as South Africans, we don't need to be haphazard. We need to be structured in the way that we deal with it, because as a country post-1994, we became an oasis in a desert of economic challenges that many countries on our continent and elsewhere face. And we face a lot of people streaming into our country. We therefore need to deal with it in the most structured and proper manner. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. President, there is nothing populist about addressing this issue. The Labour Market Report of 2017 clearly stated we have more than 1.5 million foreigners who are working in our country. Those are the ones who are working here legally with visas. There's many more who do not have visas. It is a reality that key strategic departments are run by foreign nationals. For example, there's a Philip Saunders who was recently appointed to be the new CEO of SAA. Recently, more than 40 engineers from Germany who came to our country. And in our many institutions of higher learning, it is a reality that most senior lecturers there, they are coming from either America or Europe. Truck drivers recently protested for the very same issue of being overlooked in their own country. Therefore, I want to put it to you that there should be no quotas or ratios on the employment of foreign nationals. We've got existing laws. And foreign nationals must only work for jobs that we as South Africans do not have skills for. And I want to put it to you that we do not have a skills shortage in our country. Therefore, my question to you is, Botswana recently enacted laws that prioritizes their own citizens in the labor market as well as the economy. And there was never any person that is saying they are populist or xenophobic or they lack Ubuntu, because it is natural for any country to prioritize their own citizens. Therefore, why is there a need for an interministerial committee, whereas there are existing laws that should be existing immigration and labor laws that should be just complied with, because the government must lead in terms of making sure all companies, including the government, complies with existing immigration and labor laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndati. The Honorable the President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. We are quite aware of a number of issues that the Honorable Member has cited, including a recent one from Botswana, who delineated a number of business activities or areas of business that should only be occupied and owned by Botswana and all that. And that was quite straightforward. It was not seen as being xenophobic. He's absolutely right. The same has happened with other countries like Ghana, like Nigeria, and so forth. So we are scanning our own continent and the globe in relation to this, and it is precisely this, that this structure that you are so dismissive of is going to be looking at very closely, and it is also going to base its work on the experiences of a number of other countries, and will engage a number of sectors of our economy, including the truck drivers and many others, in finding a solution that will be able to take us forward. So I thank the Honourable Member for citing an example which we were already aware of, and we will take all the various other proposals and suggestions from various quarters into account in finding solutions in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next supplementary question comes from the Honorable M.G.E. Hendricks.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to know if the President knows that my constituency in the Cape Flats in Cape Town, in spite of being the most discriminated community in South Africa, have no quarrel with Africans from the diaspora trading in the informal sector where most of them operate. There is no xenophobia in the colored community, and I hope the President tells us he knows this. We hope the President deals with the discrimination against my constituency, as there is an African preference policy with regard to medical care, to jobs, housing, basic service, COVID relief, and economic activities. Although colored youth are demographically strong in the Western Cape, they have been overlooked in the appointment of members of the National Youth Development Agency, and I'll my complaint to you, Honourable Speaker, about this marginalization. When I get an opportunity to ask you an oral question, Honourable President, it will be to ask you to consider to appoint a committee of inquiry into discrimination against the colored community, which is also black. Does the President agree that we must not estrange fellow Africans from all over the continent by barring them from jobs and trading opportunities in our economy, including the informal sector? We will not follow the example of Botswana and Ghana. Their leaders will disappoint the founding fathers of the new Africa of the 1960s. As it is Women's Month, will the President consider a visa-free entry for African women into South Africa and access for them for a livelihood in the informal sector? Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Hendricks. You've quite loaded it. The Honourable the President.
I did not perceive a question. It was more commentary, which I would say one, yes, welcomes, because it is, those are issues that we need to deal with. And I will join Honourable Hendricks and say yes, we have not perceived any form of xenophobia in the Western Cape, in the coloured community. That is so, and we hope that that holds, that in the end, even here in the Western Cape, all our people are treated equally, with the dignity that all of them should enjoy. You also referred to the NYDA issue, which I'm told has been referred back and is being dealt with. And as regards, which I already spoke about, what is happening in Botswana, in Ghana, in Nigeria, those are areas that we are watching and precedents and examples that we are watching closely. And when this committee does its work as led by the two ministers, we will be able to find solutions. And these will be South African tailored solutions. There will be solutions that are born out of the conditions that exist in our country, the circumstances that we live under. So I think when we do come up with solutions, there will be very South African unique solutions. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third supplementary goes to the Honourable Maudwe. Maudwe?
Yes, thank you very much, Speaker. President, we think it is proper that as the President of the Republic, you adopt a firm stand on this issue. Not this IMC that you want to establish, which will not assist in any way, like all other commissions that were established in the past. The historical evolution of the South African economy was always dependent on the exploitation of black people labor from the rest of the Southern African region. People from Malawi, Mozambique, Angola, Zambia, and Zimbabwe toiled, and some perished in the mines of this country, building wealth for white people. Our schools and universities have benefited from the skills brought in by our fellow Africans too. I don't want to remind you, President, how sentiments of anti-Africanism like this can easily cause xenophobic attacks on our fellow Africans. And in fact, a lot of African brothers and sisters paid daily with their lives due to this. Now, President, you are the chairperson of African Union, which is supposed to champion and advance the cause of unity amongst us as Africans. What are you doing to prevent this toxic sentiment of hatred amongst Africans? And what steps are you taking to forge unity amongst Africans? Are you not of the view that the emerging anti-African sentiment in this country is as a result of your failure to grow the economy and employ people? I'm sure you'll agree, President, that United Africa, which will lead to the attainment of one Africa, one currency, one economy, and one president, is the only solution that will bring about the end to fighting our fellow Africans over the so-called jobs here in South Africa. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. Just on time. The Honourable the President.
Okay, Honourable Speaker, I was just reeling from this barrage of political speak of one Africa, one president, and all that, which I'm still dizzy on. But let me say, one of the things that we've always promoted as a country is to have a very Africa-centric and focused approach to the development of our continent. And our policies have sought to advance the interests of Africans. And that is why we are not shy and afraid to call ourselves pan-African in our approach. And if in terms of many things that we seek to do, we always say that Africa must solve its own problems, African problems or African solutions. And in this regard as well, and that is why this need for this committee, because what the honourable member is saying is diametrically opposed to what the previous honourable member said, because you've got divergent views. Other views are just South Africa focused, that we must just look at ourselves, and in a way it tends to also forget that we exist within our continent, the African continent. And that needs to be born out of our own history, out of our own positioning as a country, and also needs to take into account, yes, the contribution that has been made by many Africans to get us to where we are. And in balancing that, we've also got to balance the needs of our own people. And that is why I said we must take into account the frustrations of our own people with regard to the migration that they see coming in, and this notion that they have that they are being pushed out of jobs. So we need to balance that. We often try to do things in a very balanced manner, and in doing so, in setting up this committee, we are going to come up with what I believe is going to be a very balanced position, and position as well within our own country in relation to our own people, but also position as well in relation to the continent as a whole. South Africa must continue giving leadership. It must continue being the reservoir of what is best for the African continent. And in doing so, there are certain things and principles that we need to embrace, adhere to, and advance, and be able also to show good examples in some of the things that we do. So, Honorable Speaker, I've heard what the honorable members are saying, and I remain convinced that it was correct to set up this interministerial committee to deal precisely with the divergence of views that I have had this afternoon. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last supplementary on this question goes to the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. President, I think that this question and the discussion today is looking at things from the wrong end of the pipe. And surely the pressure is because our economy is shedding millions of jobs every single year. So instead of being xenophobic about current jobs that non-South Africans are doing and scapegoating foreign nationals, what we should do, and I'm sure you agree with me, is create many, many more jobs, and we can do this by attracting foreign direct investment. South Africa needs to be part of the global economy. But the truth is, Mr. President, we scare foreign direct investment away with red tape, labour legislation, and other mechanisms so stringent that nobody wants to create jobs here. To encourage investment and job creation, particularly for the 13 million South Africans who are unemployed, we need the economic reforms that you speak about so often. But we cannot have those reforms whilst we have expropriation without compensation, NHI, nationalisation of the Reserve Bank, and prescribed assets. We need to reject this nationalism in favour of internationalism. Mr. President, my question is, why does your government persist with talk about these job-destroying, investment-destroying policies that you know are going to shoot your own investment drive in the foot, kill jobs, and make our economic recovery so much slower than it should be? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steenhuisen. The Honourable the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's possible that Mr. Honourable Steenhuisen, Honourable Steenhuisen is really hard of hearing. It's possible that I may whisper to him that he needs to go and visit an ear doctor, because he hardly ever hears. I'm not being unkind to you, but he hardly ever hears what I say. And I've said to him repeatedly, and Honourable Steenhuisen, we are committed to the path of implementing reforms that we know will be able to attract foreign investors to come here. Now, this notion that you put across that we are sort of committed to these policies that will scare investors away is clearly not correct. It is not correct, and that is why I say you need to listen very carefully to what I say, and I'm not being unkind. Because when you listen to what I say, I've been saying repeatedly, we want to attract foreign investment, and it is for this reason that we've held 2 foreign investment conferences, and we're going to have one later this year, albeit on a hybrid type of basis, like we did with the infrastructure symposium.
Oh. Thank you. Mute, Honourable Primrose. Mute. Mr. President, please proceed. And
in doing so, we will be continuing to remove the red tape, which you speak about. And the red tape, yes, has been there, and I've been saying, rather than have red tape, we must roll out the red carpet so that investors should come in. And that is exactly what we are going to continue doing. And the economic reforms, there are quite a number of things that we need to do and make sure that we attract investors. We continue debating the question of land, the NHI, and the thing about the central bank. I'm not even going to bore you and get into all that. But you need to hear me very clearly and carefully when I say we are going to proceed with the reforms. And some of the suggestions, by the way, to your favor that you've made are very good suggestions that we will follow through with. But all I plead for is that do listen very carefully when I articulate all these issues, because that is precisely what we are committed to. We want to promote policies and approaches to our economy that are going to be attractive, that are going to attract investors to come to South Africa and invest. Not only for foreign direct investment, but also for local investors. We want the private sector to invest and to invest in a bigger way than they have in the past. And of course, they'll only be able to do so if we lower the cost of doing business, if we remove the red tape, if we ensure that the regulatory framework is in place, if we make sure that the reforms we've spoken about on energy, on water, on roads and everything are actually implemented. And we are going to implement that, and we are on the path to doing precisely that. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. President, you'll be relieved to know that we are now getting on to your last question for the day.
Oh.
It was put to you by the Honorable Somio. That is question number 12. Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. One of the greatest challenges we are confronting as a country is the theft of public resources by those given the responsibility to manage those resources and also to safeguard them. Those we have appointed as stewards of those resources. A priority at this moment is to address the concern that has been raised by our people about the involvement of political office bearers and public servants in the unlawful awarding of tenders and contracts to relatives and acquaintances. While most public servants are dedicated, diligent, and law-abiding, we nevertheless find that such practices are found in all spheres of government and in many public entities. State capture is the form of corruption on a grand scale, where criminal networks are used to control public entities, to unlawfully enrich private individuals and companies. This corruption took place alongside a deliberate effort to weaken and disable the country's law enforcement capabilities. Therefore, a critical part of our efforts to root out all corruption, both in the public and private sectors, has been to rebuild our law enforcement agencies, to restore their integrity and credibility, and provide them with the means to act against corruption. I spoke about this at length earlier. Over the last 2 years, we've made significant progress in this regard. In strengthening institutions like the NPA, the Hawks, SARS, the SIU, and others, so that they are able to detect, investigate, and prosecute all acts of corruption. At the same time, we have worked to strengthen the measures inside government to minimize potential for corrupt activities. In 2016, government reviewed the Code of Conduct for Public Service Employees to, amongst other things, prohibit public service workers from conducting business with the state, be it in a personal capacity or as a director in a company that conducts business with the state. In 2019, I extended this provision to the whole of the public administration when Section 8 of the Public Administration Management Act was brought into effect by means of a proclamation. This criminalized the act of public administration employees conducting business with the state. To ensure action against those who transgress these laws, systems have to be put in place through the Personnel Salary System, the PERSAL as we call it, and the Central Supplier Database to identify public servants who tender for contracts with the state. In the last month, the ministers of the Public Service and Administration, of Police and of Justice and Correctional Services have drafted a memorandum of understanding to better coordinate efforts that will lead to the investigation and the prosecution of those employees who were found to be conducting business with the state. While all wrongdoers must face the full might of the law, our priority is to ensure that corruption does not occur in the first place. We're therefore strengthening financial, human resource, and other management systems to reduce the risk of unlawful conduct by any person in the public service. And this we're doing so that those who are employed, as the question sort of started addressing, who are employed by the state, should know that it is essentially a conflict of interest that while you work for the state, to do business with the same state. And this often happens also in departments where people seek to do business with the state, knowing very well what the contract arrangements and movements are all about, and then they start doing business with the state. It is wrong. It is wrong because it deprives those who are genuine business operators from either tendering or participating in a pure vanilla, if you like, type of business opportunity with the state. So it is conflictual, and this is what we are seeking to stop. And we want to prevent it before it happens, so that we do not have to embark on criminal justice mechanisms to get people investigated and finally arrested. And we believe, Honorable Speaker, that this is the best way of strengthening the capacity of the state. This is the best way of enhancing its capacity to be able to purely serve the people of our country rather than to serve the interests of just a few. Because doing business with the state is precisely that. You are an insider, and therefore business is then done with you, and it is unfair to everyone else. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Honorable Somio.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, and thank you very much, Honorable President, for answering that question. It indeed brings life into the fact that you, as part of the broad movement, the African National Congress, you are committed, both in words and deeds, to outroot corruption as it finds way into individuals, both in the organization and in government, who have plundered the state's resources and have brought our hard-fought democracy to a point of humiliating a disgrace. You have spoken largely on the part of revamping the procurement system, something which has shown its own way. Hardly that those who are comfortable with corruption find their way through that system. In doing so, Mr. President, are you ready to share with us the core elements of that supply chain management revamp as the guarantee to deepen and instill the ethical conduct of those who work with government, and as well to the people in enforcing trust in the public sector? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Somyu. The Honorable the President.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much, Honorable Somyu. And indeed, the determination and the commitment is there. And it is all based on doing the right thing. And one works on the basis that we are all committed to doing the right thing. And if we are committed to doing that, let's do it properly. And let's not try to cut corners or to defraud the system. Now, clearly, we've got to have a number of elements. And one of the key elements is adherence to proper values, to proper principles, that they should be put out there and that should be enshrined in the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct, in the main, deals with the values and the principles that we would like our civil servants to adhere to. And once they adhere to that Code of Conduct, then I believe that we've done half the work. But the other one is to make sure that we take preventative measures. The preventative measures must then be to set out the rules that this is what we would like everyone to comply with the certain rules. And we are now going to move towards inserting in those rules things such as lifestyle audits, so that they act as a preventative measure, so that everyone who works at a particular level in government should know that we will want to know precisely where, if they have wealth, where it comes from, whether they are living beyond their means, and whether they are susceptible to any form of outside influence or paying heed to certain interests outside. And when we have done that, we will then put in place a number of other measures. Some will be preventative, some will actually, in the end, be punitive measures that will deal very severely with those who transgress those rules. And we hope and work from the basis that most, if not all, civil servants are civil servants who are committed to serving our people well, who are committed to Batupili type of philosophy and principles. And if they are, then they have nothing to worry about. There are, however, those few who will want to buck the system, those few who will want to be fraudulent. And the other measures that we will put, the punitive measures we will put in place, are meant to deal precisely with those that are going to try and transgress the system. I am a true believer in the belief that our people who are in the civil service, in the main, want to serve our people, and we want to strengthen their hand, even as we get them to sign the Code of Conduct and behave in a particular way. They should be willing and able to do so with a great deal of commitment, because that Code of Conduct then enshrines all the good principles that we want everyone to adhere to. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second supplementary goes to the Honorable Nkwankwa.
Speaker, the second question is supposed to actually go to my leader.
He had been following the proceedings connected all along until recently. He's been struggling to connect for the past 10 minutes. In fact, he's in the waiting room, waiting to be connected to the meeting. May I request that he be allowed to ask the follow-up question last, so that IT can actually sort out the connection problems that he has at the present moment, please.
I will allow that, Mr. Gwangwa, but my instructions was that you actually were taking this. But I will allow that and pass on to
Thank you.
give the opportunity to the Honorable Steenhuisen in the meantime to take on. Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. President, I can assure you my hearing is absolutely perfect. And I know that because I heard with my own ears what your Secretary General said the other day, and I quote,
"What a joy.
Tell me of one leader of the ANC who has not done business with government," unquote. Mr. President, your problem is that your Secretary General is absolutely right. There are very few people in your government and in your party that are not doing business with the state. And that's why you cannot root out corruption, because it means you'd have to take a strong stand against those. I'm very glad you've spoken about lifestyle audits. As you know, the Premier of the Western Cape has subjected his entire provincial cabinet to lifestyle audits, and they've been made public. Mr. President, in February 2018, you stood at this podium and promised us lifestyle audits, not for civil servants, for members of your cabinet. My question to you is therefore, has every member of your cabinet undergone a lifestyle audit, and when will you make those public?
Thank you, Tete. Mr. President.
I heard it. Do you want to hear the answer? Is your ear open? The lifestyle audits that I spoke of is in process, and it's going to be done without any fail. I can confirm that, and I promise that. Yes, it's in process. It's in process. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Honourable Dena.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'd like to wish the Honourable Buthelezi a happy 92nd birthday, as well as the leader of the FF Plus, Dr. Groenewald, who is also celebrating his birthday today. Mr. President, with reference to public servants and officials doing business with the state, and as Mr. Steenhuisen has just mentioned, your Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Ys Magashule, stated earlier this month, tell me one leader of the ANC who has not done business with government, insisting that there is no law prohibiting this. While it may not be prohibited by law, is it morally and ethically acceptable for ANC leaders to do business with the state, taking into account the rampant corruption in South Africa and the culture of, and to quote you from a 2014 SABC interview, dishing out patronage? And can you confirm or deny the SG's revelation that indeed there are no ANC leaders, including yourself, who have not done business with the state? I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. The Honourable the President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. A week ago, I penned a letter to the members of the African National Congress. And one of the issues I raised is precisely this issue which has been raised by Honourable Steenhuisen, that you are also raising. And it is the issue of leaders doing business with the state. And I said in that letter, this is a matter that we must discuss. We must discuss this matter because it's a matter that has reared its head within the body politic of our nation. Because people of our country are incensed. They're most unhappy to see that leaders of the ANC and their families are doing business with the state. It's a matter that should be discussed, I have said. Now, it is going to be discussed in time, and the African National Congress, which is this big, more than 1 million members organization, will discuss it itself and come to a conclusion on this matter. And we are going to have a fairly robust, detailed discussion on it, because it is a matter that now requires proper discussion. And we would like, and it is for that reason I raised it in that way. I said we must discuss this matter without, we don't need a Lekgotla. We don't need a Lekgotla, because it is a matter that requires discussion. And we will discuss it, and we will come to finality on this matter. And that is what I'm able to say to you and to promise you on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You can't get better than that.
The Honorable Nkwankwa, I have to come back to you because I am informed that there is nobody in the waiting room. How do you advise? Honorable Nkwankwa, are you taking the last supplementary? Honorable Nkwankwa, for the last time, are you taking the last supplementary? There is nobody in the waiting room. We have just checked. Thank you very much, Honorable President. I am now going to throw to any other party the last supplementary. Any other party in the House? Is there anybody who wants to take the last supplementary for the day?
I heard very clearly there was an opportunity. I'd love to take it.
Nobody?
Steenhuisen will take it with pleasure.
Honorable Steenhuisen, you have taken a supplementary on this particular question. The supplementary, I deliberately am saying to a party that did not have a supplementary on this particular question. If there is nobody, that chance is gone.
When did you get married?
Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Singh, are you taking the last supplementary?
Yeah, I'm willing to take it if there is a vacancy.
Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, and sorry, Honorable Nkwankwa. Honorable President, the whole issue of public servants being involved in doing business in the state brings up the issue of a number of them being removed from their positions in certain departments. And then you find them either getting promoted positions in other government departments in the country or in state-owned enterprises. Will you ensure that there is a mechanism that these individuals be blacklisted so that when they apply for vacancies in any other state institution or government department or municipality, then their records will follow them and they will not be appointed to government positions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. The Honorable the President.
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I'm able to confirm to Honorable Singh that yes, we are looking at that, and it's a mechanism which will rely on technology and artificial intelligence, where we will be able to track anyone who has either been dismissed or dealt with for various things, including malfeasance, and reappears elsewhere in the government system and gets employed. And the system that we are going to come up with will block that. So reliance on technology is going to be of great help to government, and that is why I have sought to stress it over and over again, because there are systems like that and we are going to employ them. So yes, thank you very much for the suggestion. We will take it up. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. That concludes the questions to the President, and I thank you, Honorable President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Members.
Honorable Members, the last item on our order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. I now wish to recognize the Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party from the chamber. Honorable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the House will remember that we established ad hoc committee whose mandate was supposed to end on the 31st of August 2020. I move that this House extend the deadline by which an ad hoc committee on appointment of Auditor General is extended to the 30th of October to complete its business. I so move, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now put the motion. Are there any objections to this motion?
Right, that concludes our coverage of the live proceedings in Parliament, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has been answering questions posed by members of the opposition party, discussing a variety of issues from gender-based violence to procurement of PPEs. Well, it was not an easy start to parliamentary proceedings when EFF members raised concern about their members not allowed to participate in the national legislature, and the matter was, however, resolved, and President Cyril Ramaphosa answered